on the Bassmaster Tour for the year, and we're at Lake Eufaula. It's early March, and the water's in the mid-50s. Seems like everywhere we've been, the water's been in the mid-50s, and I've been fishing in a coat. And, you know, the water level is going to play a major important role in this tournament, as I can see. They've had the water up high and in the bushes and in the cypress trees and in the grass for about 2 weeks now, and we get here and they're dropping the water level. So it's sucking the fish out of the visual vegetation and trees that you can see and sucking them out to the edge. And the difference between this lake and the one we just came from last week, Toledo Bend, is there's no hydrilla, there's no milfoil, there's no aquatic vegetation at all for them to fall into. So it puts you in a real awkward situation. You know, most of the shoreline cover is getting too shallow for the fish to be in it, but there's nothing outside of it. So this is going to be a particularly challenging tournament in that respect. The good news is it's a great lake and there's a lot of fish in it. And day one of practice was a pretty good one for me. I caught several fish on the upper end of the lake. Now I'm trying to expand the same pattern, fishing where creek channels sweep against the vegetation so the fish can fall into that vertical edge and have the deep water nearby. The first day I caught 5 keepers, had one about 5 pounds further up the river. Now I'm kind of expanding this pattern to the mid-lake, and we'll see what happens. You know, you're kind of limited in a situation like this where you have dirty water, shallow cover, and I'm using, because the water is so muddy, I'm using a spinnerbait with a big Colorado blade. Willow leaves are typically what I would use around shallow vegetation. Because this water is so muddy, you need something that's going to put off a lot more vibration, and that big gold number 5 willow leaf, or excuse me, that gold Colorado does a lot better job than a willow leaf does. The other bait that's been good for me is a jig, pitching a light jig with a big number 1 Uncle Josh frog, pitching it into that shallow cover and working it through that logs and grass and that type of thing. My biggest bass the first day of practice came on the jig. I caught several on the spinnerbait also, but it's just kind of varying the two back and forth. This is a lake that really doesn't offer a lot of options when the water's up and falling like this. You're just going to fish basically the edges of the cover with, you know, shallow running baits that will work through the cover, and a jig and spinnerbait's tailor-made for that. There's one. And he's just a keeper, but he ate that spinnerbait, boy, right on the outside edge of that grass line. You know, it's really a key, and I found this to be true, especially, see how white that fish is? This cold, muddy water like this, it's a key. You got to really just slow roll that bait and just kind of milk it through the stuff, and then when they cork it, they get it. But a lot of times it's hard to even discern a bite from, you know, from the grass. Another thing is, when it's cold, I found that a trailer hook, that fish was caught on the trailer hook. It's a trailer hook makes a big difference, because a lot of times they just get them in the lip with that trailer hook. You start on a cold morning. When the water's changing, which it does in the spring a lot, particularly in a lake like Eufaula, you've got to be aware of what the bass do when the water rises and what the bass do when the water falls. Usually the most difficult scenario to combat is falling water. The bad thing about falling water is the fish, they lose their security in that, being in that real skinny, shallow water. So they want to have deep water nearby. So what I have to try and concentrate on is as this water is falling several inches a day, I found it to be totally true, is you can't be back in these long, flat, shallow bays. You've got to be out where the shallow water meets the creek edge, and you've got to have 3 or 4 foot of water under your boat. So if you're out there fishing a lake that the water's falling, you might want to think about that a little bit. If the water's rising, you've got the luxury of moving up with the fish. As the new cover gets flooded, the fish typically will flood the banks because they don't have that fear of being trapped. They're actually moving up for the new food. The one thing you got to deal with, though, with the rising water is the influx of mud. And so, you know, you've got goods and bads with both, but you need to be able to just remember 2 rules. As the fish fall back, you need some deep water security. As the fish move up and the water rises, the fish move up, you move up with the fish. And again, normally, jigs, spinnerbaits, things like that, shallow running crankbaits work really well. points of grass like this are just textbook for when the water's falling, because I've got a 9-foot channel right bumping up against that shallow, tapering nothing flat, and that is exactly the kind of places that I've been catching my fish. When you've got that deep water right against it, they can be just in the outside edge of that cover where they've got the security of that deep water. And this place ought to have a bass. Water's awful muddy in here, but it's still a good-looking place. Oh, God, dog. I mean, he just corked it right just off the tip of that point. And I got a trailer hook and everything. I don't know what. I thought he just knocked the blades out. And if you've never fished a spinnerbait and you're not familiar with the term knock the blades out, what you're doing when you're fishing a spinnerbait, especially when you're slow rolling it, you're feeling every vibration of that blade. You're just kind of milking it through real slow. And when you feel the blade get knocked out, it'll actually quit turning, and it almost creates a semi-slack in the line. And when you feel that, you need to set the hook, pull the trigger, because a lot of times those fish, what they do is when they inhale the bait, they'll come up from behind it, and basically what they do is they just, the vacuum of their mouth stops the blades from turning, even though you haven't felt the pressure yet. They're pushing the bait at you. When they take it in their mouth, you've got to set the hook. Although, that one must have done something funky, because I set the hook and didn't get it. You know, something as simple as pork rind can make a difference in the way a bait fishes. You know, whether you're using a number 11, which is the smaller, or the number 1, which is the larger, a lot of times can make a difference on whether you get a bite or not. And I found the number 1, which is the larger version, actually slows the fall of the jig. It displaces more water. And in cold, muddy water, sometimes you'll get 2 or 3 times the number of bites by just something as subtle as changing the size of the jig trailer and going to a bigger frog to make all the difference in the world. It'll take that 3/8 ounce jig and slow the fall almost in half, all right? You know, another good place when the water's moving are riprap situations where you'll have a bridge, you got a highway going across here, cars passing by, but the riprap is deep and it kind of necks the water down so you have current movement, whether it's going in or out, whether the water's rising or falling. And a lot of times fish will station themselves around the points of riprap, bridges, things like that. It can be a really good place to fish, good place to slow roll a spinnerbait or throw a shallow running crankbait. I'm going to pull out. This water here in this creek's awful muddy. There's another boat ramp about 12 miles down the lake. I'm just going to trailer down there rather than have to run through the rough lake, main lake. I'm just going to trailer down and put it in the next creek down, save myself a little time. This week's Team Outdoor Channel tip has to do with fishing a jig. You know, jig fishing has a lot of variables, particularly the type of cover and the type of water you're fishing. This week on Lake Eufaula, we were fishing cold, muddy water, which required a very slow-falling jig. You've got two ways to modify the fall of your jig. You can use a lighter head, but a lot of times that makes it more difficult to penetrate grass and cover. Or you can take a heavy jig like a 3/8, half, or even a 3/4 ounce jig and slow the descent by using a larger type of trailer, like a pork frog or a larger plastic trailer. Normally when the water is cold, I opt for pork up till the water hits about 60 degrees. Then I'll go to the plastic trailer. But the size of the trailer actually slows the descent of the jig and makes it a lot more palatable to the bass in cold water.
Don't go away. Angler on Tour will be right back.
You know, a surprising thing the last couple days of practice has been the fact that I can't catch any fish on the banks that don't have any grass. Every place that I've caught a fish has had little points of grass or little tapering areas of grass, and then just falls off into 3 or 4, 6, 8 feet of water. And when you go down a bank, it looks great. It's got lots of trees and it's real vertical. It's just like there's just no fish there. I mean, I've fished them and fished them and fished them, and the fish just have definitely, with the water up, have gone to this grass. And now that it's fallen, they're still staying around the grass, but you know, adjacent to that deep water. And you know, that's how you develop a pattern. You know, you try a lot of different things, and once you kind of dial in on something, then you try and repeat it. And that's pretty much what I've been doing, is looking for these grassy points near deep water and just trying to find water that's got some good color. This has got a lot better color. Since I moved to this area, it's got a lot better color in the water than where I was earlier this morning. Now I just got to get a bite or two. I really think that this fallen water has had a lot to do with these fish getting out of this really shallow brush. First day, I was able to get a couple bites flipping out of the shallow stuff, and it's just, since this water's dropped about 6 or 8 inches a day, they just haven't been in it. A lot of the brush is almost so shallow now you can see the bottom. A limited amount of cover in the water when it gets like that. 5 foot deep here right off this little edge. I mean, this is just perfect. Exactly the kind of place you should catch one. That channel going into the back there makes a little swing against this shallow grass flat. Wind blowing in. It's just perfect. Fish, sometimes the fish don't read the same books that we do, though. Textbook to us and textbook to them can be a little different. Man, there's bait in here. I mean, I'm seeing shad flicking. This is right. There's the best fisherman on the lake right there. Big old heron or egret, or I'm not exactly a bird person, but the big white fishing bird. Where they at? Cool bird. Cool looking bird. I guarantee you he's back here for a reason. Shad, probably blowing back in here. There's what a Lake Seminole stump will do to your lower unit, and I got off easy on that one. You know, there's a lot more to tournament fishing than just locating and catching bass. You got to get from point A to point B, and you got to have equipment to do that. You know, when we go to a lot of these bodies of water, they're unfamiliar, the water is high, you've got logs, stumps, rocks, a lot of things that will wreck your equipment. If you don't have help, service crews there to service your equipment, you can be in big trouble. I've got a couple of guys here, the Yamaha and Skeeter service guys. They're going to describe a little bit of what they do and how they support tournament fishermen.
Well, what I actually do is I show up on site during the competition days, and I provide technical support for the Yamaha Pro staff. That could be anywhere from just keeping the engines running peak performance for the guys, doing some routine maintenance things, or if the guys actually have a technical issue with their engine, they'll come see me. If they get in some shallow water and do some damage, they'll come see me as well, and we can take care of it and get the guys back on the water.
Well,
we provide support to the anglers whenever there's a problem during the day or during the tournament and they need something fixed on the boats. We do our best to make sure that the anglers are fishing out there all the time instead of having problems with their equipment.
Oh, that's a big one. Whoa. That's a nice fish right there. Anytime I get one on, it makes me a little nervous. You know, it's been a long, slow day. Look at that. 5 foot of water, edge of the grass, exactly what we talked about first thing. Water's 50-some degrees, fish is just ice cold to the touch. And it's a nice one, too. But you know, the bad thing is, as beautiful as that fish is, and as much as I like to catch fish like that, it's been a 3-bite day on this end of the lake. And I got to believe that the pattern is strong. I think it'll hold true, but for my money, I think up the river is going to be a lot better deal. Man, what a great fish. That's what Eufaula is full of. And if you don't have 1 or 2 of these in your bag every day, you're not going to play the game here. I guarantee you that. 4:30. Well, it's at least going to end the tournament practice on a good note. We'll go in. They're calling for, starting to rain already. They're calling for rain the next 2 days, and I don't know what that's going to do. I can't believe it would hurt the spinnerbait bite. Maybe it'll slow this falling water down and make things better. I'm not really sure, but anyway, it's been a tough practice, and I imagine it's going to be a slugfest tomorrow. I better get me 5 every day to play ball in this. And the rain's come again. You know, every tournament this year, every tournament from January to now has been rain or cold. I haven't been out of a coat or a rain suit yet, and now they're predicting the next 2 days, possibly even the next 3 days, rain with some torrential storms and lightning. You know, it's bad enough when fishing's tough, but when it's tough and you're wet and cold, it's no fun, you know. Sunshine puts you in a good mood. It'd just be nice to have some sunshine and some warm conditions for a change.
I've got Joe Thomas from Cincinnati, Ohio. You can see him Monday nights on the Outdoor Channel. Joe, weight today is going to go in at 10 pounds even. Is the lightning scary when you're out there? Do you duck out, go under an overpass?
It scares the dog out of me, and every time that Tripp holds us off for lightning, I elevate him about this much on my priority list of guys to buy Christmas presents for, I promise you.
All right, Joe Thomas.
You know, this Lake Eufaula event was another frustrating event for me, kind of like Toledo Bend. You know, it's one thing to come away from a tournament and you know where you made your mistake, your error in judgment, your poor execution. But this was a tournament where I really can't put my finger on what exactly went wrong. I'm not really sure a lot of things went wrong. It's just not a lot of things went right. I only caught 3 fish the first day for 9 pounds and then 4 fish the second day for 10 pounds. And I ended up right in the middle of the pack in the standings. The first day was a real good fishing day, and there were a lot of big stringers caught. I just pretty much had a consistent tournament, but maybe the area I was in just didn't have the size fish that was necessary to do well. You know, there were some patterns going on that I really didn't get in on because, you know, a lot of guys were stacking up and a lot of good fish caught in the overflow pipes. When they were dropping the water was being pumped into the lake, and there was a lot of boats piled into one area catching big stringers of fish. But that's just not my style to go in there and just sit boat to boat with those guys. And you know, this is competition. Sometimes it's not about what your style is, it's what's best suited for the tournament and the lake. And maybe I should have, you know, gone in there and tried to get a piece of that action, because that was definitely what was going on. I chose to fish way up the river. a place I'd found the first day of practice where I didn't get a lot of bites, but you know, they were good quality fish, 3-pounders. I ended up with 7 fish that weighed almost 20 pounds, and so it was the right size fish. I just didn't get enough bite. Same standings. I'm 69th place after 5 events. I didn't raise or lower a single place, so you know, that's encouraging that I didn't drop any. And we've got one more tournament, which is next week on Lake Santee in South Carolina. That's where we'll make the cut to 100 anglers, and then the top 100 will move on to the 2 California tournaments. So, you know, I'd like to make a strong run at Santee to try and get up in that top 50 or 60, because once we move to California, they cut the field down to 100. It's going to be a little tougher to make up a gain in points. So anyway, we're off to Santee next week, and we'll see what happens there.